iHeartRadio, TalkStream Live. There's that many different ways to listen to the network now. It's hard to remember them all. I want to thank each and every one of you, like I always do, for tuning in. And it's Wednesday night, so that means, and maybe you're a first-time listener, well, I'm going to be joined by my good friend, fellow host on the network, Mr. Anthony Patch. Myself and Anthony, I came across him, as many of you will know, listening to Clyde Lewis and Ground Zero. Must be about 2 years ago or so now. Probably Tony will remember. He can correct me in a moment. But when I was listening to Anthony speaking about CERN, this magical machine, in my opinion, because to me at that point, it was just a really, really cool physics experiment. Yeah, I appreciated the danger involved, but I didn't really know that much about it, to be honest with you. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I went to Anthony's website, anthonypatch.com, and I realised I could actually get in touch with the guy via there. And then about a day or so later, Anthony came on the show and he blew my mind, and he blew all of your minds about this CERN, the Large Hadron Collider over in Geneva, Switzerland. And tonight, ladies and gents, I'm really thrilled about this because we're going back to the scene of the crime. That's right, it's time for Patch and Baker to talk about CERN again and how it's related, very, very linked closely, don't pardon the pun, to the blockchain. But before we get there, Anthony, welcome back, my good friend. And I was telling you, I'm feeling really tired the past couple of nights before the show, but that does not deter me. The music kicks in and it's like I get that second wind and I'm raring to go, man. But how are you doing?
Very good, my friend. And I appreciate, over 2 years ago, you inviting me onto your show, and equally because you encouraged me to come on to TFR as a host on Fridays. And it's really been an excellent experience now for over a year to be a broadcaster. And I never, ever had any designs of being a broadcaster or an author or any of that. So I really want to thank you for encouraging me along the lines that have developed.
No, absolutely. And I thank you for everything. You've opened my eyes to the research you've led me into, the greater understanding of everything around me, and of course a greater appreciation for the fact that everything, absolutely everything, has a spiritual aspect to it. And be it yourself or when we look at the hosts on the network here, I mean, we really do try to get the very, very best people to speak on the subjects that they cover. And you definitely tick that box. It led to me and others calling you the world's leading CERNologist. And it's definitely meant as a compliment. It might not sound it, but it definitely is, Anthony. Before we even get into all of the good stuff at CERN, you're also running a project right now, a campaign over on Patreon, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I'm hoping that people will find some value in the information that you and I have put together, and that they would come over to Patreon and help me in that regard. So I won't belabor that point too much. If you go to Patreon, you'll see my message on there. But we're going to talk about CERN tonight because, Kev, our audience numbers on TFR about 6 weeks ago took let's say a quantum leap. The numbers doubled, and we want to thank our audience members who have consistently supported us. And because the numbers have doubled, I think we need to kind of retrace some history, some of our historical steps back to CERN for their benefit, for the benefit of the new audience members that have not heard the foundational and revelatory information that both you and I, through our research, have presented to the core audience. And we want to thank the core audience as well, because they've been with us through all the ups and downs and all of the discoveries, and they have been loyal to us, and they've supported us through their memberships at TFR and through the purchase of Entangled magazine and participating in our webinars. So I always, always, always want to acknowledge and thank those that are listening and supporting us, because we do this for their benefit. I always say, Kev, you and I are quantum entangled, and we can share information and discoveries all we want. But really, the purpose is to present those discoveries to our audience.
Oh, absolutely. And, I can't think of a better time to do this because, CERN, they have a calendar, and we can look forward, especially from January, at the year ahead. So as well as recapping on just what CERN is, what it does, and why it's so important to everything that myself and Anthony talk about here, we'll also be able to project forward and take a look maybe into the future, to have a look at what they're going to be doing this year, and then way into the future, Anthony, as well.
Yeah, so we're going to give you a little historical, and for those that have been with us for a long time, this certainly is not going to be, just a redundant process of sharing information about CERN. We are going to show you what's going to be happening according to their own published calendar. We're going to talk about the future of CERN. The relevancy that I want to tie to a very hot topic that we have been covering an awful lot, Kev, the last few weeks is blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Tonight, I would like to show, by way of elaborating on a statement that I made about 3 weeks ago, in which I stated that the Large Hadron Collider, specifically the main ring, is in fact a quantum computer. And I want tonight, after we lay a little bit of background and history and show a little taste of the future of CERN, I want to demonstrate the veracity of that statement, that the collider is a quantum computer and its tie to the blockchain system that is being built out at a parabolic rate. So go ahead, sir.
No, absolutely. And before I let you lay out the history of CERN, just to tease the audience as to what we're going to be getting into later on, just think of 600 cells being launched into outer space. Now, that's a little teaser for them. They'll be thinking, what the heck is he talking about? But Anthony, CERN, people will be thinking this is something new, this particle accelerator. The media started falling over themselves a couple of years back, telling us that this was going to be unlocking the secrets of the universe, but there's actually nothing new about CERN, the facility itself, is there?
Not really. I think that's a great place to start. This is the newest version of the Tower of Babel. This is the whole agenda of Nimrod. And we are going to demonstrate that in the February 1st issue of Entangled magazine at anthonypatch.com. The Tower of Babel, thank you, Kev, for your artistic work with Photoshop. Not that you had to manipulate the images other than to do side-by-sides and to do some overlays, just like you did when you overlaid the quantum chipset, the qubit chipset from D-Wave, over the architecture, over the blueprint, if you will, of Herod's Temple in Jerusalem. And it's an absolute match, the architecture, the layout of the qubits, where they are on the chipset and where they correspond to the location of the Holy of Holies within Herod's Temple. We're going to do the same thing on the 1st of February with Entangled magazine, except we're going to show you through the images, side by side, the correlation between the architecture of both IBM and D-Wave's quantum computer architecture, how they set up the internals of the D-Wave and the IBM quantum computers, which are virtually identical, which is interesting because they're competing interests, but it demonstrates that they're actually collaborating interests in that the architecture of their machines are the same. And those same architectures between IBM and D-Wave happen to match the Tower of Babel,
and
which
Anthony,
CERN is.
Yeah, just add to that because it's really relevant. I mean, we've probably got a little giggle to ourselves the way I was reacting to the temple and the microchip and then the tower and things like that. And I kept on saying it was blowing my mind. And I think it's having that exact same effect on people because anyone I've shared this with on Skype during a conversation or on Facebook, I mean, the responses are just, wow. I mean, this really hits people between the eyes and it becomes obvious what's going on then.
Hide it in plain sight, right?
Absolutely, and almost as above, so below.
That is very true. Let's build on that. If we are talking about building a tower, then we are talking about CERN as having the same stated purpose and mechanism as the Tower of Babel. Now, the Tower of Babel, we're making a correlation to a quantum computer. in terms of its architecture and its functionality. It is accessing, by their own statements, parallel dimensions. This was the agenda of the Tower of Babel, to access heaven, which you would consider another realm or another dimension other than where we are. This is also the stated purpose and goal and mechanism of those at CERN. They, by their own statements, state that they want to open a doorway to other dimensions. Again, same process as with the Tower of Babel. The tower itself is a communication device, or was, okay, including a singular language, which today we would consider mathematics to be the singular language. And we know that when God destroyed the Tower of Babel, he confused the language into 70 other languages. Now, same process is coming about today because we're in the days of Noah. CERN is a communication tool to open doorways or portals. D-Wave also. Now, Kev, we're going to step into the quantum mechanics of this. But before we get into the quantum mechanics and more of the background, let's go ahead and give them the schedule for this year, and then we're going to backfill like we always do. We kind of give you the headline first, and then we're going to give you the evidence. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, absolutely, because we've got the latest version of the injector schedule. Now, the last time we presented this, Anthony, it was really quite blank, and we weren't getting too excited about anything that was going on at all. But it's a build-up, really, isn't it? Towards the end of the year. And then I believe, like you were saying to me, towards the end of the year, they'll actually be having lead to lead ion physics for 4 weeks. And they'll also be using the Awake accelerator that we've also covered in the past as well, Anthony.
Yeah, last year in November, actually, of 2016, they fired up the first installation of Awake, and then through most of 2017, they operated and tested the Awake linear accelerator, which in its framework, if you will, what you would call the armature is 30 meters long. The actual chamber, a plasma Wakefield chamber, is only 10 meters long. That's where the action takes place. The action results in a 1,000-fold increase in the acceleration of particles in a straight line or linear configuration. Now, they're going to continue that this year. And the two things that are notable is for us to go back in history again, Kev, to September of 2016, in which you and I did a show in which I stated that CERN, not necessarily with the linear accelerator, but in the employment of lead-to-lead collisions, what are known in the periodic tables as capital P, lowercase b, PB to PB collisions. If people happen to be looking at what they call the draft injector accelerator schedule for 2018, if you want to look at this schedule, type in CERN injector accelerator schedule 2018. You'll see what we're looking at. What I'm driving at here, when they collided PB to PB in September of 2016, I said that due to the construct of the magnets of the time, which are the same magnets today, which are niobium and titanium, it had the capability of hitting a peak energy power moving from tera electron volts to quadrillion electron volts. I stated that they could hit as high as 1 quadrillion, 1 PeV, or peta, 1 PeV, 1 peta electron volts. Now, a lot of people I took heat from saying, there's no way, because they're operating at 13 tera electron volts. How are they going to hit peta electron volts? Well, you have to understand that when you collide lead to lead, these are the heaviest and densest of the elements in the periodic table, and therefore result from the collision in the highest luminosities. In other words, the highest energies that can be produced. So in looking at the magnets themselves, their physical construct, their capabilities, their specifications, because again, I bother to read the technical materials. Okay, the technical sheets. I said it could hit 1 PeV. What happened 3 weeks later, Kevin, 2016?
Again, we need the drum roll, Anthony, because CERN themselves came out and confirmed they had actually hit that level. So to hell with everyone who was scoffing at the claims beforehand.
That's right. And they actually hit 1.14 peta-electron volts. Now, admittedly, that was a peak. It's not a sustained energy level, but it goes to my point of the significance of colliding ions of lead, which, beginning in November, on the 4th of November, CERN will begin lead-to-lead collisions, what they call ion physics, for 4 weeks in the north and east area. These are the experimental impact points within the main ring itself. This is where the beam lines terminate into a fixed object rather than crossing the beams in one of the 4 main detectors and allowing collisions to take place either at 45-degree crossings or head-to-head. What they will do now in the north and the east areas is to collide these particles into an impact point, but they will also conduct crossings or head-to-head within the collider detectors themselves. So the point is there's an awful lot going on with lead-to-lead collisions this year. And conjoined with that is the Awake Linear Accelerator, which produces an acceleration 1,000-fold of particles in a plasma Wakefield chamber above and beyond, 1,000-fold above and beyond what is capable in a 27-kilometer ring. They can achieve 1,000-fold increase in a 10-meter long chamber. The two machines, as we said many, many months ago, actually last year and early last year, we said that the machines would be conjoined. Therefore, they're going to combine the power. It will be very interesting to see in early November, Kev, what sort of energy levels they're able to achieve, because the magnets they have in place of niobium and titanium right now can, as they've demonstrated, contain collisions that achieve luminosities into the quadrillions. We'll have to see if it goes beyond 1 PeV this time.
No, absolutely. And looking at the schedule here, we've got 4 defined runs of the actual Awake Linear Accelerator. And then, get this, in April, and we always talk about the fact that there's spiritual stuff going on here at CERN. It's very, very tied in with spirituality and the darker side of things. And on Easter Monday, Anthony, that's when the beam will be taken to the LHC. Nothing like marking Easter Monday, eh?
Yes. And they have another one in September that is on the 5th of September, which is Junji. And that is a celebration. They do it every year. It's a holiday. It's a holiday in Switzerland, acknowledging the massacre that has to do with Luther, the Lutheran Church, and Luther and his followers, and the breakaway from the Catholic Church, the massacre that occurred on that date. The Swiss acknowledge that, and they're not celebrating the massacre, but they're acknowledging the massacre. So they do have a couple of significant holidays, including Ascension Day and a couple of others that are on their calendar. So, yeah, there is a spiritual side to this. And, Kev, I think we'll wait until after this first break. We'll do a little history on some of the spiritual sides of it, like symmetry, Gothard Tunnel, the Shiva statue, just to bring people up to speed. Okay?
Absolutely. That sounds perfect to me, but I'll share this in the actual chat room right now. And, anyone can look at this, folks. It's no top secret memo or anything like that. You just go in there if you want to, maybe just even Google the Injector Schedule 2018. I'm sure that will bring this up. But you yourselves can have a look at that. And then, of course, Anthony, when the machine is running, we see so many videos over on YouTube, and I've been there myself. I'm criticizing myself here as well. There's so many different kind of measurements that we can look at coming from CERN's own website and different interpretations of what people are looking at. And we've had reports of the faces of demons and a whole host of things going on. And this is what happens every year, right? Because as new people come to this topic, and most of the stuff that you'll see on the CERN website, I mean, it's confusing at the best of times, isn't it?
It can be confusing. And again, we try to translate things. We try to simplify things because Kevin and I do look at the hard science that's involved in this. And it's important that we do make it simple and digestible. It can be quite overwhelming. And it is unfortunate that there are people, Kev, that will take our statements, take our conclusions, and they will take them out of context. And, we just deal with that. We just roll with it. But it's important that people become active listeners, that they pay attention to the words that we present to you, because we are trying to simplify it. There's a lot more complexity we could add to the discussion, but that isn't germane to a radio show.
And of course, CERN isn't the only ring particle accelerator that's out there, but it's certainly the biggest one. And it's definitely the best example that you get of all of these different nations coming to work together. On one hand, we're going to war with the Russians and everyone else in 1 minute, but yet they all come together to work at CERN. And Berkeley, it's another one, Anthony. We've got Brookhaven Labs. I mean, these things are dotted all around the world. And I was even kind of tongue-in-cheek, maybe pondering the fact with the new Apple headquarters. I mean, people say it looks like a UFO on the ground. It also looks like a ring-based accelerator to me as well.
I agree with you. I think it's a tip of the hat. I think it's just an acknowledgement as to the significance of ring-based particle accelerators, because the Chinese want to build one that's 100 kilometers. We're going to talk about CERN's plans to build an identical one after the break, and when that's slated to happen. But the point is, I think that you're making with Apple is that it's more of a symbolic acknowledgement that computing is communicating through dimensions, through realms, if you will, and quantum computing in particular. And that's what we're going to highlight again tonight, is the fact that these circular-based quantum colliders are actually quantum computers.
Oh, they most definitely are. And we've got a couple of minutes before the break. And Anthony's got his own show here as well, if we've got any first-time listeners tonight. That's on a Friday. I'm his co-host, and a massive show coming up this week, Mr. Patch. Truly massive.
We have L.A. Marzulli coming on Friday to discuss the fact that they have received the results of their DNA testing of elongated skulls that they examined and recovered DNA from with permission. It was a hard-fought battle, but with permission to bring the DNA to the United States for laboratory testing. And he will be presenting in a press conference in Los Angeles on the 2nd of February. And it will be live stream. If you go to lamarzulli.com, go to ppns.com, you will find the information on the live stream available. This, I think, is an exclusive, Kev, if I'm not mistaken. I think we are the first to present L.A. Marzulli and this topic of this DNA results to our audience, to the audience in the alternative media. I think this is an exclusive.
I mean, Anthony, this kind of information, and L.A. Marzulli, I mean, I still have to pinch myself at the fact I get to speak to people who are used to listen to on Coast to Coast and shows like that all the time. But yeah, I'm really, really excited about this exclusive. Like you say, it definitely is an exclusive. And it's going to be one of those nights where we're almost going to be feeling it's a bit Indiana Jones going on there, Anthony.
Yeah, definitely. LA is a good guy. I respect his enthusiasm, and more importantly, I respect his research. He is a hardcore researcher. Now, he's in areas that I don't necessarily research into, but that's why we bring him on the show, is to present some diversity of research to our audience, because they don't want to just hear me blather on all day long.
Absolutely, and the listeners know there's absolutely no stone left unturned here on the Kev Baker Show. Gary Heseltine will be my special guest tomorrow night, but we'll be back after these short messages, so don't go anywhere.
This is the Cam Baker Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kev Baker. I've got Anthony Patch here with me tonight. Check his work out over at anthonypatch.com. And we're talking about CERN. That's right. We're getting back to the stuff that we used to cover when we first got together to do shows. And of course, CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, situated over in Geneva, Switzerland. And Geneva itself right now, as this globalist new world order all comes together, is an interesting place indeed, because obviously you've got the LHC there, but it seems to be becoming a hub for artificial intelligence as well. And more on that as the show progresses. But Anthony, like I was saying in opening, I mean, the Large Hadron Collider part of CERN, this is just the latest kind of project that has taken place there. And there's been really important projects in the past.
Yeah, definitely. CERN was something where they broke ground in 1953, which was my date of birth. That makes it 64 years old, folks. I'm an old guy. And it was built primarily for nuclear research, specifically to model in computers, even back then, model the potential yield of nuclear warheads, what I would call in silico modeling, in silicon. So it then developed beyond nuclear research for the purpose of nuclear warhead modeling for simulations into a collider facility and into particle physics research, which does have a direct correlation to the development of nuclear warheads, also directed energy and kinetic energy weapons, such as the linear accelerators. Those have a direct impact, a spin-off of technology into those two types of weapons, kinetic and energy. Kinetic meaning the acceleration of particles and impacting a point, something that is done all the time at CERN. So this is not just simply a pure science for the purpose, as they say, of modeling the Big Bang or even opening a portal. There's lots of spin-off that comes from this. So it's been operating since 1953 when they broke ground. And the main ring itself has been running, I would say about 20, almost 25 years now. And I first ran across CERN itself when I was in West Germany in the 70s in the military, and I was involved with nuclear warheads, specifically what is known as the W-70 nuclear warhead, which was a variable yield nuclear device and had a yield potential of between 1 and 100 kilograms of TNT, if you will. And it was transported or launched on what was known then as a Lance missile system carried in a WN-52 field artillery piece. So part of my training exposed me, I use that pun on purpose, exposed me to the fact that CERN was in Geneva, Switzerland, basically over the hill from where I was stationed. And I became fascinated with that, and I have continued the research all the way through. And what really turned the tables was when I first began to understand there was more than just science going on, that there was a spiritual component. So to accelerate the timeline we're talking about, we go to the statue of Shiva, a gift from the government of India to CERN, erected just outside the headquarters building. And Shiva has three aspects: destruction of the universe, and then what I call the laying waste of a flat plane playa, a clean sheet of paper, if you will, in which nothing exists, and then the rebuilding of the universe. This is what Shiva represents. This comes out of the Hindu belief system. And so you begin to go down that rabbit hole of exploring what's the spiritual agenda behind the technology. And just to make it a very short presentation here, this is for, by the own words, of opening doorways to other dimensions, other realms. Something that Dr. Stephen Hawking said is not a good idea. It's not something we should be doing. So at this point, what we have is a facility for nuclear research that coincides with nuclear warheads. And if you'll remember Dr. Oppenheimer and his infamous statement upon the detonation of the first nuclear device, which took place at Trinity, he said, in quoting the Bhagavad Gita, he said that I am become death. So you need to bear in mind that you cannot separate the physical from the spiritual and vice versa. There is a motivation here that is not benevolent. And this is something that I've laid out for years now, and including in my books and in my Entangled magazine. If you would like a detailed presentation about CERN, just read Entangled magazine. Again, we don't have time on the air to go into a lot of the more technical nuts and bolts of it. But what we're going to go to tonight is to show you some of those nuts and bolts as they relate to particle colliders in their quantum mechanics aspect and how they relate to quantum computing, and then the tie to blockchain and AI. Go ahead, sir.
No, and absolutely. Anthony mentioned Shiva there. And, no matter what your knowledge on science and particle physics is, that should be an immediate red flag. Surely you would expect to see maybe a statue or some kind of structure depicting a nucleus with electrons orbiting around it, something like that. Something relevant maybe to the nuclear research back in the day. But no, there it is, Shiva, loud and proud, right there out in the grounds. And even the location itself. Now, Anthony, you can explain the exact location here, but this is literally situated above the abyss, isn't it?
It is. It is situated, one of the 4 detectors specifically is located over what historically has been considered the location to the abyss, an ancient Roman temple to the god Apollo, Apollyon, Abaddon, the destroyer. And this is why CERN was located where it is. It isn't because the real estate was cheap or that it was necessarily easy to tunnel through the bedrock, through the material there. No, it was chosen for spiritual purposes because they truly believe in their statement of opening a doorway. The doorway, if you look in Revelation 9, in which the angel is cast from heaven and is given the key to the bottomless pit, and then in Revelation 12, the abyss is open, and we have the locust army amongst many other demonic entities that are released upon mankind. They truly, as their agenda is to open this doorway to the abyss, because this is who they're communicating with. Understand that quantum computers can be used for benevolent purposes, certainly, or they can be applied for nefarious or malevolent purposes. And this is what's happened. People understand that devices, technology can be used for good or for bad. It can be used for weapons, and the weapons can be either offensive or defensive, and it depends on who's wielding the weapons, even down to a handgun or a knife. So without belaboring that point, understand that quantum computers, by their very nature of quantum mechanics, is a communication device with other realms. And this is how it's employed, whether you're talking on the small scale of D-Wave and IBM and their quantum computers, or on the macro scale, if you will, at CERN with the Large Hadron Collider and the other ring-based colliders around the world, also based upon the simple facts of quantum mechanics. They are all interdimensional communication devices. So they are, by definition, quantum computers. It's not just the energy that's derived from collision. It's not the so-called discovery of new particles, quantum particles, or the singularity, the prima materia of the universe, or the modeling as they want to put forward, the Big Bang, which I don't hold to that scenario. But it is for the purpose of communicating with other realms. And that is borne out in their own public statements. Again, Kev and I function as reporters. We give you their own statements. We gather the statements. We provide it to you. We play the audio clips from the videos. In my Entangled magazine, I provide you the transcripts of these clips, and we just report their own words. And then we go to their own personal websites, like we do with Gordy Rose, and we show you his belief system in things such as putting forth the notion of the great old ones returning, as H.P. Lovecraft described in his novels. And this is something that Gordy Rose holds up, and I pick him out as just one because he's so public. He holds out the works of H.P. Lovecraft as something that guides his own research and his own belief system. And this is a belief system in the demonic realms. So you really have to stop and ask, why did they build quantum computers? Why did they build quantum-based colliders like CERN and in other locations around the world? Because these are communication devices that have their origins and their roots in the crafts. Technology, if you translate it from the Greek, is the science of the crafts. This is alchemy. This goes all the way back to geomancy. I'm being repetitive, but it's for the benefit of our new audience members. Go ahead, Kev.
I mean, alchemy, you'll hear about them sometimes smashing lead and gold ions at CERN. That's the kind of alchemist language that you come across here. But, you know, this is where I get really, really into it, Tony, because obviously we're now getting down to this quantum level, and we all laugh and joke on the network. Jimmy Jeans, he calls me the quantum mechanic, but this is where we can really compare what D-Wave have and CERN itself and make a very compelling case for the fact that CERN is a lot more than just a particle accelerator. I mean, this is a quantum node on a quantum network, right?
It definitely is. So let's examine the quantum mechanics. First of all, I want to say that let's recall back into the history of computing, just back, 30, 40 years, 50 years. We had what were known as dummy terminals that were hooked up to a room-sized computer at that time, a mainframe. Now compare that to the mainframe being the cloud. You can also take that and look at CERN with the Large Hadron Collider as a mainframe computer. And now the dummy terminals are the computers that are being built and have been built by D-Wave and IBM. Everybody has been focused on D-Wave, including myself, and thinking that was the only game in town. But Kev and I broke this almost 2 months ago. This comparison of the quantum mechanics between D-Wave and IBM's, which is a collaborative copy of D-Wave's research in quantum computing, and the quantum mechanics employed in the collider at CERN. They're identical. The only difference is scale. So I'm going to break this down for you, but I want to emphasize again, the mainframe, if you will, is CERN. CERN produced the World Wide Web for the purpose of distribution of data that resulted from the collisions. There was so much data, it needed to be distributed to other laboratories and scientists in those laboratories to be able to break down the data and make some determinations. Now that's the foundation of blockchain. That is the foundation of the World Wide Web. It became something that the military-industrial complex promoted because they saw the value and distribution of data through a web for the purpose of continuity of government, should there be a nuclear strike take place, specifically in the United States. The hub of that distribution all the way up through to today is UC Berkeley with their own synchrotron accelerator, but that's where the servers for the Energy Sciences Network was established. The ESNet is the distribution system of that data, and it is controlled at Berkeley. And there are spiritual reasons for that, which I'll get into later. But the point here, that World Wide Web and that ESNet 5 was the foundational backbone to what we have today as the blockchain system.
Well, let me piggyback onto the back of that, Anthony, and take it one stage further. because right now we've got the world's elite. They're all meeting at Davos in Switzerland. And for me, I mean, Davos is where the real work gets done. The real agendas are rolled out for everyone to see. People make a lot of fuss about the Bilderberg group, and I'm sure back in the day that was the main game in town. But Davos, this is where it all goes on. And today I was listening to this, and they were talking about launching something called the Autonomous Global Cybersecurity Centre. Now, this is coming to us out of Geneva. Now, the autonomous part of this is where it's interesting, Anthony, especially with everything you're talking about here, because we've made a direct connection between AI and the blockchain itself. We call it raising the IQ of the AI. And isn't it interesting then how we've got CERN there, this ESNet 5, and now we're going to have an AI-controlled global cybersecurity centre. Now, there's also going to be a manned physical centre elsewhere. But isn't it coincidental? Not. That the autonomous part of this is going to be right there at ground zero where everything else is, CERN, etc.
Yeah, and an awful lot of the AI research that we have presented is originating out of laboratories in Switzerland as well. So, yeah, there's nothing here that is coincidental. It's just simply, we just report the facts and you can see it. It's evident for itself.
And, Iferian in the chat, yeah, you can actually go and Google this. This was something I sent to you today as well, Anthony. This is what they're actually sitting openly announcing. And that's the thing with Davos, unlike Bilderberg. They're very, very public about everything. It's just one of these gigs where they don't expect people like you or I to actually listen to what they're saying. And a lot of what they're planning, Anthony, and it's very, very AI and cybersecurity related this year at Davos. I mean, this is really of big interest to the topics we cover.
Yeah, and it should be, because right there, obviously, in Geneva, Switzerland, is CERN. And again, this is the mainframe. Understand from the quantum mechanics aspect, and I'll dive into this very quickly, Mary, make it very succinct, but I've covered this in Entangled magazine as well in detail. What you have at CERN in the main ring are particles that are accelerated to 99.99% the speed of light, almost converting matter to energy in terms of E equals mc squared. These particles under acceleration are traveling in opposite streams in what is known, they call it the pipe. Okay, that's the ring. Now, traveling in opposite directions, they are then allowed to cross within one of the four detectors, and they have a collision that occurs and particles that are yielded, and energy yields, and luminosity is what it's called. The point that I'm emphasizing is this opposite rotation of accelerated particles through a magnetic field. Now, that's very simple, just an overlay. Let's go to quantum computers. Let's go to the qubits. Let's look at a qubit, which is a quantum bit, 0 and 1, or now in the ternary of moving to 0, 1, and 2. What we're talking about in a quantum chipset are not transistors. These are qubits. They function in the following manner. They accelerate electrons in opposite directions through the qubit chipset. This is the direct correlation from quantum mechanics between quantum particles, which are electrons, moving at near the speed of light in a quantum chipset in opposing directions, that occurs at CERN on the scale of 27 kilometers. The mechanics are still the same. The result is still the same. The ability to access other realms by their own statements at CERN, statements at IBM and D-Wave. They are making identical statements in which they are accessing other realms, other dimensions, if you will. I prefer to call them realms. Go ahead.
Even the environment's very similar as well, Anthony. You've got the black cube at CERN, at D-Wave, and it's cooled to, the very, very coldest that you can possibly imagine, colder than space, for those quantum mechanical effects to take place, right? The quantum magic. And similarly, in that ring at CERN as well, we've got similar cooling taking place because it's taking advantage of these similar quantum effects.
Exactly. At CERN, they are using helium to cool the pipes, to cool the coils, the superconducting coils that primarily, at the present time, the quadrupole and dipole superconducting magnets are composed of niobium and titanium. Same materials are used in the D-Wave and IBM quantum chipsets. They are superconducting niobium chipsets that are 100 times colder than outer space. Same thing they do at CERN. They're both cryogenically cold. The reason that they're cold is to reduce the resistance in the materials so as to achieve superconductivity. Superconductivity simply means that you reduce the temperature to reduce the resistance to then minimize the amount of power, electrical power, that is necessary for the acceleration of particles. Then we move into things such as quantum tunneling and superposition and into combinatorial optimization. So we're sticking with the quantum mechanics, the actual mechanisms themselves to compare. But understand, even at CERN, they are also using the same mathematical computational operating system with their large-scale quantum computer as they're using with the smaller one. So D-Wave and IBM's computer, think of those as dummy terminals that are linked to CERN. And we've already demonstrated from D-Wave's own website their absolute collaboration, connection, sharing of information and research between CERN and D-Wave already. I'm just reporting the facts to you, folks. Go ahead, Kevin.
Absolutely. And, we're almost on the break. And, think back to that famous picture as well of the crazy-looking scientist. And I don't say that in a derogatory fashion. He just looks like your stereotypical mad scientist. And he was sat there, white hair, white beard, at CERN, with that very famous picture now, Anthony, with his Mandela and Bond on there. And of course, you were the first person I heard making the connection between that and the exact same type of mathematics that you were referring to there, which we used to make a connection between the Mandela effect and basically the revision of our reality around us because of the experiments going on there, right?
Yeah, definitely. Because again, reporting their own statements that they're reaching into other dimensions and they're extracting resources and bringing those resources into our dimension, into our reality, our realm. And I coined the phrase quantum pollution because they're bringing resources, including energy, by their own statements into our realm. This is a communication device. And when you bring something into another environment, by definition, you're polluting it.
Absolutely. Now then, 3 minutes to go, and we've got so much more to get into. And I really do think there's a lot to be gained from revisiting all of these topics, not only for the new listeners out there, but even myself included here. We've got so deep into some of the AI and the quantum computing itself. It's good to have a little refresher course, Anthony, on all the stuff that led us into this information in the first place. And we always used to hammer home the point, and it's good to do so again, that when you talk about CERN, always think of it as almost like a double-edged sword, because with CERN, think D-Wave as well, because the two of them are absolutely connected, which was bore out in that article not too long ago where CERN were analyzing the data.
They were analyzing the results that they claim led to the discovery of the Higgs boson. And they wanted a further confirmation through D-Wave processing the data that resulted from this luminosity, the collision of the particles. And so, they come out eventually, we show and we make the statements, and then months later they come out with it publicly and say, basically, oh yeah, Anthony and Kev were telling the truth. And that's why they put my picture up, Gordy Rose did, at Tech Vancouver on his first slide of his PowerPoint was yours truly. And he was talking about you and I and quantum computers and the Mandela effect. And it was a nice tip of the hat. Thanks, Gordy.
Absolutely. And, CERN, be it the Shiva out in the garden or the big parchments that you can see there with all the ancient script upon it. It really is a place that deserves a lot more investigation. And, someday soon, I really do hope, well, I dream that myself and Anthony can gate crash the party at CERN. And of course, like we were saying the other night, we would be entirely respectful if we did ever get there. But honestly, Tony, I think we would maybe get to within 5 miles of the main gate, and there'd be alarm bells going off in the data room inside.
Well, I have an announcement for the audience. My fiancée, Kathleen, and myself, we're going to honeymoon at CERN, and we're going to do the dance of symmetry during the wedding reception.
Oh, symmetry. Now, we'll come back on the other side, and we'll get into that, because this is getting into the more metaphysical and the occulted magic at work at CERN. Hope you're all enjoying this so far. 1 hour down, 1 hour to go. And before we do go to the break, please remember, Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew coming right up after the Kev Baker Show tonight, right here on your number one network, Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com. We will be right back.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Anthony Patch is my special guest here tonight on your Kev Baker Show, right here on your number one network, Truth Frequency Radio. And we're moving into hour number 2. And tonight we've been covering CERN. And that's that underground facility over there in Geneva, Switzerland, where they smash together particles. And now we're going to go a little deeper beneath the surface when it comes to CERN. We're going to get into the side of things that takes us away from the science and more into the spiritual. And to do that, like I say, I've got Anthony Patch with me. Check out his work over at anthonypatch.com. Check out my work over at kevbakershow.com. And of course, if you want to donate to the cause here, there's a PayPal button on the website, or you can get a subscription through TFR to either of our shows. So then getting back into it, Anthony, we're going even deeper into the topic of CERN just now. And you, tongue-in-cheek, mentioned that you were going to have a bit of a symmetry dance going on. And I think for the benefit of all the listeners out there who might not appreciate what that's all about, this really did give us a big window into what's really going on behind the scenes at CERN, or at least the attitude of the people behind it.
When you say we're getting deeper into it, specifically, we're going 300 feet below grade. 300 feet below ground is where the actual main ring and the detectors are located at CERN. Most of the facilities are underground, and that even, raises some questions as to why. From a technical standpoint, there are things such as radiation, synchrotron energy such as gamma rays and X-rays that are produced at right angles orthogonally to the direction of travel, the pathway of these accelerated particles that are moving through a magnetic field, and it produces the synchrotron energy. So part of it is a shielding aspect, but there is a spiritual side to this, because they are conducting, and again, we're just reporting, folks, they're conducting ceremonies 300 feet below grade. Specifically, they produced a music video. You can look at it on YouTube. It's called Symmetry, the Dance of Symmetry. Now, many of us in the alternative media have done a lot of work dissecting this. You can go out and you can see the work of not only Kev Baker and myself talking about it, but my good friend Gon Shimura from Face Like the Sun has done a couple of real good breakdowns on the Dance of Symmetry. So I offer you that so we don't belabor the point here, except to say that why is science involved in a ritualistic dance? Again, look at the breakdowns that have been done on YouTube, and you can see it for yourself. But just very quickly, I'll give you one piece of this. Not only are they dancing on top of one of the colliders 300 feet below ground, but also they have what is known as a scene in a white playa. This is a dry lake bed in which they have a circle inscribed in the soil, and they are dancing. There's a black figure and a white figure dancing the dance of symmetry in the soil. I don't need to tell our audience that is very clued in, Kev, that this is a spiritual process. This is a magical process. This is witchcraft. When you present what are representing a black spirit and a white spirit in a circle in a white salt lake bed, okay, focus on the salt. This is demonstrating, again, going back to Shiva, the second aspect of Shiva, which is what I called the dry lake bed, the playa. Long before we ever saw symmetry come out, I had said that's the second aspect, is the white playa of the universe, where it is null and void. It is devoid of energy, devoid of form. It's devoid of life. And this is what they portray, amongst many, many other things that obviously have an occultic nature, spiritual reference in this dance of symmetry. So it begs the question, why would a scientific organization present magic to the public?
And this is nothing less than a magical ritual. And Anthony's bang on the money there. This circle, it's definitely a witch's circle. It's for magic. Nothing to do with science when you see them actually performing this. Again, another red flag should go up that there's something far, far more going on than the public are told. And then there was another ceremony, stroke ritual, Anthony, that even the most hardened researchers, people that have been looking at this kind of stuff for years, right? I myself, I've got the Super Bowl coming up. And every year I analyse the symbology that they throw out to the public within these rituals. It's not a halftime ceremony anymore or a halftime performance. It's a halftime ritual. And we had very much a ritual taking place. It's something called the Goddard Tunnel, didn't we?
Yes, indeed. And this is about 100 kilometers from CERN. And again, lots of breakdowns on YouTube for this. You can see it. But this, even more than the Dance of Symmetry video that CERN put out, is flat out witchcraft. They show the dance of the demons, and they also show above ground on a large projection screen, they actually show the images of the portal being opened at CERN. They show the images of the demonic entities coming through the portal, their doorway, as CERN calls it, into our realm. So they're celebrating the fact that they're going to open using, in quantum mechanics, again, back to the quantum computer discussion, using quantum tunneling. Now, we've laid this out for years now, talking about quantum tunneling as it relates to quantum computers. This is an acknowledgement with the opening of the Gothard Tunnel, with all of their ritualistic dances, all demonic, openly demonic. They're not trying to hide it. They're showing that they're worshiping Lucifer. They're showing that they're opening the doorway to the abyss. And the tunnel itself represents that quantum mechanic effect, that process of quantum tunneling. The quantum tunneling is the communication portal to the abyss, to the other side, to the demonic entities that they are in communication with. And so, we said quantum pollution, we said Mandela effect, but more specifically, the information derived produces the technology of today, having its roots in things such as necromancy and geomancy, but all the way through the alchemic history of modern science and technology, the science of the crafts. The crafts today are the same as they were going back in history. What you're seeing in technology today, I call the evidence of evil.
Absolutely. And this might be lost on some of the people who were even attending that ritual, that opening of the tunnel. But last night I had Dr. Eric Karlstrom on the show, and as what always happens, one show flows into another. Because this is what we're talking about right here, the fact that they're doing this out in the open, using a a real life mountain going into a hillside to actually depict to those that actually are in the know right enough that what they're really celebrating is quantum tunneling. And there was Baphomet-like figures and all sorts, all hideous-looking creatures coming out of this tunnel. It was Geordie Rose that he was the one that says they're tunneling to other dimensions. And Anthony, all of this, again, part of the magical spell at play, because this is a revelation of their method, almost. And they're hiding things, again, in plain sight.
They are, and when they had on the projection screen the image of the portal being opened, they had 3 of the Beatles coming through. Now, Beatles is not the Beatles English rock and roll group I'm referring to. I'm talking about the Egyptian Beatles. What did the Beatles represent in ancient Egypt? Immortality, and more specifically, the resurrection of the dead. And we have spent a lot of time talking about DNA research. And this whole process of opening this doorway to the abyss is not only for the release of the spirits, but for the resurrection of the dead through the resurrection of the DNA of the dead. And a couple of weeks ago, Kevin and I, maybe not even that long ago, we presented you an article in which the DNA of a gentleman who died in the mid-1800s in Iceland, his descendants, they took their DNA samples and they were able to trace and recreate the descendant, the original bringer of the DNA to it was Greenland, to Greenland, who was a gentleman with an African heritage, one of the few Africans in Greenland, thereby facilitating the lineage of the DNA. They were able to recreate the DNA of that dead ancestor. Now, I'm not saying that they 3D bioprinted this guy and he's alive again. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that all of the research into DNA, by their own words, their own press releases, has been for the defeating of death. That means immortality. This is what the Beatles represent in this Gothard Tunnel ceremony, is immortality through the opening of this portal at CERN.
And you know, what you're talking about there and what you're describing is nothing less than digital resurrection. Because that's exactly what they're doing at Decode Genetics. That's the company involved up in Iceland that done this amazing feat of science, in my opinion. Like I was explaining when we went over this the first time, I mean, I like these kind of crime shows and the forensic stuff, really. So interesting. Science, again, imagine me being interested in that, right? But, you've got the kind of, and I forgot where I was actually going there, Anthony. I've had a brain fart now.
No, we're talking about the resurrection of the dead.
Yeah, exactly.
And the digitized DNA.
Yeah, and usually these forensic shows, I mean, the key thing, once they find DNA of the suspect, that's what they're looking for, right? And even when they find old bodies, they identify them with that DNA sample. So for them now to say that they don't even really need that, and I know that this was a very, very unique kind of case because of the genetic markers coming from Africa to such an isolated gene pool. I get that, but I mean, it's brilliant. I know that sounds weird with all the kind of negative stuff we cover sometimes, but the science itself, the fact they can do that really shows us just how far down the line they are with their DNA knowledge.
Yeah, it really is. And, let's kind of go to the positive direction with this. Imagine a world in which all of this technology truly was applied for benevolent purposes. Now, oftentimes the question will come to you and I, Kev, from people who say, well, how do you know that these scientists realize that this is malevolent, that this is, tied into the worship of Lucifer? Well, it isn't necessarily. Most of the scientists that are involved, let's talk about DNA specifically, believe they're doing something that will benefit mankind. Unfortunately, just like I said about the whole military-industrial complex, the whole idea of weaponizing science, unfortunately, even DNA research can be weaponized, and that's where we're raising that red flag.
Absolutely. And, something like CRISPR-9, that's what I look at as being a weaponization of DNA. And we cover that quite a lot here on the show. We really, really do. And DNA, just like CERN, just like quantum computers, it's almost like that trifecta of topics that we've got ourselves into, Anthony, isn't it?
Yeah, we're talking about, the quantum computers. We're talking about particle accelerators in terms of quantum mechanics. And we're talking about DNA research, the digitizing of DNA. And so how does digital DNA tie into a particle accelerator? Let's take that for a moment. Let's kind of tie that up. Now, we've talked about it again. There's a lot of things we repeat, and we keep saying that we're repeating. But again, we have new audience members. My school was the University of California at Berkeley. This is where the human genome, specifically Dr. Craig Venter's human genome, was first mapped. That was done using the particle accelerator housed in the Advanced Light Source building overlooking the campus of UC Berkeley. Why did they need a particle accelerator? To map the human genome. Because, as I said earlier, it produces synchrotron energies. One of those energies is what is known as hard X-rays. At the time of this mapping of the human genome, the X-ray source, which is derived from the acceleration of quantum particles in a ring-based accelerator at Berkeley, had the highest energy source, highest X-ray source on the planet. And what did they do with the X-rays? Well, it's not like the X-rays you would see in the hospital. They're not looking at images of bones and tissue and all of that. What they're doing is called inferring the shape, the construct of the proteins, the folding of proteins that make up our DNA. So that's where it led to the ability to create 3D models of the digitized models, the digital models in the computer of the proteins that made up the DNA. From that, they were able to go all the way down to the quantum scale. Again, this correlates back to and connects back to the work that is going on at CERN. Because with a larger collider and a higher X-ray energy source, you have the ability in one of the beam lines to run an experiment in which you can absolutely describe, through inferring, the actual quantum particles that make up DNA. So think of it this way when we talk about digitized DNA. You can start with the smallest particles that make up our DNA, that then moving outward to the atomic and then the molecular scale, you can then recreate the folds of the multiple types of proteins that form DNA and all the way out into the helical structure, the double helix of the DNA. Now, all of this digitized modeling of DNA can be transmitted through the cloud and reproduced using 3D bioprinters to grow an exact copy of the original. Again, all in the literature, all in Nature magazine, Science magazine. It's all public information. This has all been proven. This is not science fiction. So that's what we've been presenting for all this time. And that's why there's, as you say, Kev, this trifecta, this connection between quantum computers, DNA, and particle accelerators, because they all work hand in hand and they all share in the technology. Go ahead, sir.
No, absolutely. I mean, these three things are all linked together directly. And of course, in this segment of the show, we've covered the symmetry dance. We've talked about the kind of creepy Gotthard tunnel opening that was a ritual, nothing less than a ritual right there being played out right before our very eyes. And of course, Anthony, there was another kind of viral sensation that hit the internet that we discussed at the time as well. And this was allegedly leaked footage of some kind of ritual that was going on in the grounds with hooded figures. Now, I'm sure, probably 99% sure that it was some kind of hoax. However, the fact even that kind of joking around is happening on that facility, I mean, there's something very strange going on at CERN indeed.
Yeah, and I think you and I agree that even though CERN came out many weeks later and said, yeah, those were employees of ours, and they did have their, security clearances to enter that area, and no, they weren't just students that were pulling a prank, but it was a hoax. And the hoax was that they were targeting the alternative media in order to create a stir. Let's call it a psychological operation, if you will, or you could just call it a joke on the alternative media. They wanted to see what kind of buzz they could create, to see if it would go viral. And it did. They achieved it. It was kind of like they were playing a joke on us. Yes, they were showing a mock sacrifice, human sacrifice in the courtyard of the headquarters area of CERN. But you have to stop for a moment and look beyond the joke. Because if you have a statue to Shiva, which is the god of destruction and rebirth, it speaks to what is going on in terms of the spiritual belief system within the halls of CERN itself. Does that mean that all the engineers and scientists and particle physicists are all into worshiping Lucifer? No, I'm not saying that. But those that are driving the machinery and the agenda of the work done is purely Luciferian.
No, absolutely. I mean, there can be no mistaking this at all. And some of the other connections we've made there, Anthony, and this was one of the claims that we put out there right when we were really connecting the dots at first, when it came to CERN, and that was the fact that Saturn could well be involved in all of this as well. And, we could almost go back to the symmetry dance, the circle in the sand, representing that rings of Saturn as well, the ring-based accelerator. And Saturn is key to all of this because, this black magic that we talk about, this darker spiritual side, I mean, this is tied into something called the Saturnalian Brotherhood. And that's something I covered way back when I first started the show with Jordan Maxwell, no less. And if you haven't heard of the Saturnalian Brotherhood, I mean, that's a rabbit hole all into itself. But there's definitely links between CERN and Saturn in the research we've done in the past, Anthony, isn't there?
There definitely is. So we're going to talk about the reconnecting of Earth to Saturn. If you go to the golden age of Kronos, Kronos being Saturn, and the myth is that the Earth and Saturn and Mars were linked together and traveled through the cosmos prior to entering the solar system. And once they did enter the solar system, they were in a straight line configuration in which you had Mars and Venus and Saturn in a straight line configuration. And they were connected. They were electrically connected. I refer you to the work of the Thunderbolts Project to see the images of what are known as Birkeland currents, or reflected in biblical scripture as Jacob's ladder. These are electrical currents that manifest as a twisted helix that look just like DNA. They are oppositely charged particles that naturally occur throughout the electric universe. It's not a gravitational universe. It is an electrical universe comprised of the ether, ionized gas, known as plasma, which is the fourth state of matter. It is a conductive medium in which these oppositely charged particles naturally configure themselves into light-year long, as photographed by Hubble, strands, double helical strands that connect points in the cosmos. And there's multiples of these. In the case of Saturn, it used to be that the Birkeland currents connected Earth and Saturn. The goal in the Golden Age of Kronos scenario, the goal at CERN, among many other things that we've already outlined, is the electrical reconnection using the Large Hadron Collider, the electrical connection of Earth to the southern pole of Saturn. The southern pole has a spiral, the same thing we saw over Norway when former President Obama received his Nobel Peace Prize. There was the spiral over Norway. Exactly the same thing, looks exactly the same as at the southern pole of Saturn. Now, many people know that the northern pole of Saturn is a hexagon. Those have contra-rotating charged particle clouds. The northern pole is a synchrotron particle accelerator. It produces, traveling from the North Pole to the Southern Pole, these same Birkeland currents. Now, in the center of Saturn is a black cube, and that is comprised of solid hydrogen. That is a solid cube of hydrogen in the center core of Saturn, with Birkeland currents traveling through it. The purpose of reconnecting from Earth to Saturn is to open that black cube, to free the leadership that they are communicating with, the so-called fallen angels. Go ahead, sir.
Absolutely. They want nothing more than to return us to what they call their golden age. And Annabelle in the chat room, Saturn was our sun until, and they do, the elites, these Saturnalian Brotherhood practitioners, they really do look upon the Saturn as our second sun. And this segment here has been a kind of recap on all of the spiritual side of what goes on at CERN. Again, on top of the history and the kind of nuts and bolts of what's going on there, it's really, really beneficial to be taking this look back tonight on the show. And in the segment to come, not only will be looking forward into the future for CERN and other particle colliders and the physics in general, but we'll also be covering a story about a 600 cell. Now, this is language that has become synonymous with Anthony Patch, and we teased them at the start of the show, Anthony, so this is going to be a really good way to round out proceedings tonight, because here we are again, the thing that you first introduced to myself anyway, and I'm sure a lot of the audience out there turning up in the mainstream. Go figure.
No, once again, yes, indeed. We'll talk about the 600 cell tetrahedron at the end. After the break, we're going to finish off this discussion of connecting electrically the two planets. We're going to talk about torsion fields and toroidal fields.
Oh, you can't beat a bit of torsion physics to round out the Kev Baker show. Now, please don't go anywhere after we finish up here tonight, because Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew, they will pick up where we leave off. Anthony, he'll be back on his own show at 2 p.m. PST and 10 p.m. UK on Friday night. I'll be co-hosting, and Ellie Marzulli will be bringing us a very exclusive take on his latest research. All this to look forward to right here on the Kev Baker Show and the Anthony Patch Show on Truth Frequency Radio. Don't go
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Kev Baker. I've got Anthony Patch with me. We're moving into the final part of tonight's almost CERN revisited show. This has been absolutely great to go over all the stuff that we spent over a year really digging deep down to, and that was CERN and its connections, not only to what it's doing in the world of science, but on the spiritual side of things as well. And one aspect of the universe that it opened up to me and led me to was a greater appreciation that everything I thought I knew about space is probably wrong, because I started to look into the work of the Thunderbolts project and the fact that, far be it a very, very quiet vacuum out there, this is a very, very active plasma electric universe that we live in. And this ties in directly with where we finished up before the break, because I was talking about the golden age, Anthony, and on the Thunderbolts project, they talk about alien skies. And if we were somehow transported back in a time machine, yep, I've covered them on the show as well, but if we were to go back thousands of years, the sky over our heads, I mean, it really would look to us as if we would landed on an alien world, right?
It really would, because you had these plasma discharges taking place between the planets, and they were all in straight line configuration, very close proximity to one another, including the Earth. And the mythos is that this was a time you might describe as utopia. Okay, there was no lack of food, there was no war. It was a utopian society that they believe was taking place during these times when Saturn and the Earth were traveling through the cosmos and were then electrically, more specifically magnetically, attracted by the sun. And this is where the departure from mainstream science is, not so much in the mythos story, but this discussion of gravity versus electromagnetism. And this goes to where we have separated the two, thanks to the research of the scientists at the Thunderbolts projects, of setting up two different models. They talk about gravitational versus electric model of the universe. Now, you and I hold to the electric model of the universe as being more accurate than the gravitational. And so we labeled it as the electric model being the Tesla model versus the Einstein model, which is gravity-based. Now, very succinctly, if you look at the relative strength of electromagnetism versus gravity, electromagnetism is 10 to the 39th power stronger than gravity. So it's really a no-brainer to understand the mechanics of the cosmos are electromagnetic. Are you there?
I certainly am, Anthony. I didn't realize you were rounding off and handing to me there. And, I should share with the audience, really, like I was saying when we came into the show tonight. I don't know what it is. Very, very tired this evening. So I apologize to anyone out there if I seem slightly off my A game. But I don't know, Tony, what's happened to me tonight. It must be that tired weapon that the NSA have.
Well, if you climb inside a 600-cell tetrahedron, you'll regain your strength through pyramid power.
That's what it is, pyramid power. That's what I need. I think it was something to do with the fact I ate not long before the show as well. See, that way when you have something to eat, you just want to kind of veg out and just go to sleep for 40 winks. I can tell I'm getting old now, Anthony. I really can.
That's all right. You're catching up to me. No, I laugh. Somebody out there is going to jump all over my statement and say, oh, see, he's New Age. Oh, he's a practitioner of the occult. He said pyramid power. Okay, Kev, I'm going to pontificate for a few seconds.
Please do. I love it when you do this.
Understand, folks, I am not a practitioner of the occult, never have been. Do not hold to the New Age belief systems, all those good things, wonderful. Okay, I'm a Christian. Here's the deal. All of these things, secret societies and, flat earthers, technology, modern science, pyramid power, all of this stuff, whatever it is, it's all counterfeit to God's creation. God was the original creator, still is the original creator, still is the holder of everything that's going on in the universe. And what you see in these different types of belief systems that are apart from God, apart from a relationship with Jesus Christ, are Luciferian. They're counterfeits. So the construct of a tetrahedron, what most people would say is a pyramid, is God's construct. What's been occurring is this hijacking, this counterfeiting of God's systems, his geometry, his mechanisms, his quantum mechanics, hijacking it by Satan and his minions. Kev, I'm off my podium. Go ahead, sir.
No, I think this is a perfect segue. I know you aren't ready to go into it right now, but I mean, you're talking geometry here. You're talking about the tetrahedrons. And of course, I was saying to the audience how this 600 cell is back in the news again, Anthony, and this is something you first brought to us. Tell us what's happened here. This is brilliant.
I was going to...
I'll post the picture in the chat for listeners.
Okay. Remind me, I need to finish off the torsion field and the toroidal field at CERN with Saturn.
It just felt right to go here.
Yeah. I agree with you. I saw this morning and I just had to laugh. Okay, here's the article, folks. This comes to us from GeekWire by Alan Boyle, January 24th. This is entitled Rocket Lab Unveils, quote, Humanity Star, close quote, a shiny satellite you can see in space. Now, they picture Rocket Lab CEO Peter Brock showing off the Humanity Star satellite before it was launched into space. And this is something that is in a pole-to-pole, a polar orbit, and you can see it with the naked eye. Now, it doesn't say in the article why they put it up there, other than it's something that is visible and people can see. And it's, it's kind of like this thing of, hell, we all live together, and he says, my hope is that all those looking up at this satellite, will look past it to the vast expanse of the universe and think a little differently about their lives, actions, and what is important For humanity. Oh, yes, for humanity. They're not going to tell us the real reason. I have no idea what the real reason is. The point of bringing it up, other than sort of lampooning it, is the fact that it is exactly my model of the universe, comprised of tetrahedrons. Type in 600 cell tetrahedron, you'll see my model of the universe. Why do I call it mine? Because I'm no different than the PhDs out there who claim that they have the model of the universe. Anybody can have their model of the universe. The origin to mine is Buckminster Fuller, the person who is most recognized as developing the geodesic dome and the geodesic sphere. This spherical model is what comprises this satellite called Humanity Star. It's a 600 cell built of tetrahedrons. Now, Buckminster Fuller said the simplest polytope that can enclose a volume is a tetrahedron. He did not say that was the singularity of the universe, the starting point. I'm saying that the singularity was a tetrahedron. If the simplest geometric shape that can enclose a volume is a tetrahedron, then by definition, the material that first formed the universe had to be in the shape of a tetrahedron. Now, I don't hold to the Big Bang scenario, so don't go there, but it is a replication process of tetrahedrons that causes an ever-expanding universe, at the outer boundaries of which comprises a spherical shape, the same thing as the Humanity Star. They're identical. So, Kev, they just launched my model of the universe into a low Earth orbit.
That's why I was shaking my head when you first sent this to me today, because this would have meant nothing to me if I hadn't been working with you and heard about your theory. But just think of that. There might be some kind of counterproductive spin-off that we can take advantage of here, folks, because for so many years, it's like I've been banging my head off the desk here, trying to tell people to look up, to have a look at the chemtrails above their head. And maybe, just maybe, people might start taking notice now that they're looking for humanity's star. Or on the flip side, Anthony, nobody will be able to see it because of the greyed out, filthy skies that are overhead now.
Sorry, I'm plugging my phone in here before I lose it.
I thought fired you into orbit there, Tony. I thought they attached you to the humanities patch.
No, I was climbing into my tetrahedron to get recharged. That's all. Yeah, I'm new age. Sure. Mm-hmm. Okay. No, it's just, here's the deal. I find it very humorous that they did that. But, backing up the research of Buckminster Fuller was an article that came out of CERN that we presented over a year ago from Tony Dodd, who is a mathematician at CERN, a published, huge published paper in which he confirmed, he didn't call the 600 cell tetrahedron the model of the universe. That's my label. But he confirmed the scenario that the simplest polytope is a tetrahedron, and that if you mathematically, through quantum mechanics and the data derived from the quantum particles at CERN that are collided, the data coming from the collisions at CERN, Tony Dodd from CERN published a paper that totally confirmed that the geometry of the universe is comprised of tetrahedrons. He showed the 600 cell at the end of his paper that the 600 cell is the ultimate configuration of the data derived from the luminosity from the collisions that take place within the particle collider at CERN. CERN proved my model of the universe from their own collisions. Now, will they ever come out and say, yeah, Patch is right. It is. The universe is a sphere and it's comprised of replicating tetrahedrons? No, they'll never say that. And Kev, I will never get a Nobel Prize for it because I don't have a PhD that says perhaps he's delusional on it.
Patch, just hold your horses there. You never know what lies in the future with some of this groundbreaking stuff. But this is really interesting because we've been talking here about Anthony's theory of a model for the universe. We've been talking about the electric universe as well. something that we don't hear too much about or not enough about. And before the break, you also mentioned a type of physics that, in my opinion, doesn't get enough attention, but is really, really important, and it's really interesting as well. And even the pyramids, I've seen investigators going there and talking about the fact that it's as if these structures, these monuments, give off torsion fields, Anthony. And this torsion physics is where you were going to go next, isn't it?
It is. Many people have probably seen the photographs of the double helix, the energy beam, more specifically the Birkeland currents, emanating from the tip of the Egyptian pyramids of Giza up into the atmosphere. Now, you can use a tetrahedron, you can use a pyramid, doesn't matter. And if you talk to New Age practitioners, they'll talk all about pyramid power. That's fine. That's just a counterfeit of what God created. The point here in talking about the pyramids and energy and the Birkeland currents from those pyramids is this is what is produced when you have a ring-based particle accelerator, and you can have one inside of a pyramid as well at the base. When you have particles that are accelerated near the speed of light and they're moving through a magnetic field, which is what is going on at CERN, you produce what are known as a toroidal field. That's a donut shape. That's where Joe Bag of Donuts came from. People have heard us joking about Joe Bag of Donuts. Well, he comes from the toroidal field, the donut shape of energy, lines of magnetic force that are produced around the ring, because the ring is actually a magnet. And those magnetic lines of force are orthogonal or at right angles, just like the other synchrotron energies, X-rays and gamma rays, that radiate out from this donut shape, from this ring, produces this donut shape of magnetic lines of force. Same thing that happens with our magnetosphere and magnetopause around the planet Earth. Same thing happens at Saturn. All of the planets are electrical. They all have a toroidal field. Now, what happens with CERN in producing this donut of magnetic lines of force is they also produce above the donut, above the center hole, if you will, above the north field impact point, which is at the center of the main ring, which is one of the beam lines that impacts a fixed target where they do experiments at the north field in the center of the ring. Again, think about what I said about the ring in the white playa in the video, The Dance of Symmetry and Magic and Ritual. Okay, it all fits together, the construct, the geometry. But above this donut hole, if you will, is a toroidal and a torsion field. You have a toroidal field as a donut and a torsion field, which is a double helix of oppositely charged particles known as Birkeland currents. When they produce this Birkeland current as a torsion field, it will then project those charged particles directly at the southern pole of Saturn to connect the two planets. Go ahead, sir.
No, absolutely brilliant. Just sitting listening to you explaining all of that again. And these this torsion physics, if you think of it, it's just like a kind of the donut shape, Anthony, isn't it? That's the one we're kind of commonly showing when they're talking about this. And the best representation, like you were saying there, is our own magnetic shield around the planet. And of course, there's a lot of talk because of the magnets at CERN, Anthony, and the erratic nature of our magnetosphere right now. I mean, the interference that could be happening, because these magnets, I mean, these are highly, highly powerful things that they've got fired up at CERN.
Absolutely. There's a distortion to the magnetopause and magnetosphere of the planet every time CERN fires up their superconducting magnets. Now, we said that, it's 100 times colder in the superconducting magnets than outer space, supposed vacuum of space, as science wants you to believe. But likewise, they produce 100 times the magnetic force of our magnetopause. The magnets which are comprised of niobium and titanium, and they'll be swapped out after they shut down at the end of this year for shutdown number 2, will be swapped out for new magnets that are comprised of niobium and tin. The titanium magnets right now run at 8 Tesla. A Tesla is the same as one Tesla is the same as the magnetic field of the planet. These magnets are producing 8 Tesla. They are going to go with the tin composition with niobium to 12 Tesla. That's going to allow them to go from 13.5 tera electron volts to as high as perhaps 100 tera electron volts. I believe they'll be able to go much higher than that, but I don't want to digress into that too far. The point here is that the magnetosphere and the magnetopause that protect us as shields from incoming gamma rays and X-rays and other naturally occurring synchrotron energies that come to us from bursters, from other magnetic sources, from the explosions that take place in the cosmos, produce these synchrotron energies that travel through our atmosphere. Now, the magnetopause slows these down, deflects some of them, converts their energy into matter. A lot of this I discussed in my first book, Covert Catastrophe, the incoming burster gamma rays coming from Markarian 429. But the point here is, without the shields, we are subject to higher levels of exposure to gamma rays and X-rays. And that can be a threat to our existence.
No, absolutely. And, we're almost coming towards the end of the show. And we've had a look back at everything to do with CERN. And now we're going to take a look forward as well, Anthony, because you sent me an article today, and this is the Future Circular Collider. Now, this comes from CERN itself, and I'll read this out here. It says the Future Circular Collider Study, also known as the FCC, is developing designs for a higher performance particle collider to extend the research currently being conducted at the LHC, once the latter reaches the end of its lifespan. Now, the goal of the FCC is to greatly push the energy and intensity frontiers of particle colliders, with the aim of reaching collision energies of 100 tera-electron volts in the search for new physics. Now, the FCC, hosted by CERN, is an international collaboration of more than 70 institutes from all over the world. And what's going to be happening here is, we're used to the 27-kilometre or 17-mile ring right now. But Anthony, what they're talking about here is something between 80 and 100 kilometres long. Now, this will cover a part of the original site where we see the LHC, again, situated right beside it, goes under Lake Geneva. I mean, this thing is absolutely massive, right?
It is, and it's on the same scale as what the Chinese want to build in terms of a 100-kilometer ring-based particle accelerator. Now, this is only in the design stage. This year, they're going to present a conceptual design report in the next update of the European Strategy for Particle Physics. So this is way out there. We're talking about, the present main ring having a lifespan that extends out to 2035. So in the meantime, they're planning the building of this larger collider. I don't think they're going to need it. They have the Awake Linear Accelerator that they're conjoining with the main ring, and they'll be able to achieve what I believe their target to be, which is 20 peta electron volts, which I believe is the necessary power level that it takes to overcome the naturally occurring nuclear bond between quarks in the quark-gluon condensate of Strangelet's. So that will create this opening, this portal, this doorway, as they call it, at 20 peta electron volts, combining the linear accelerator with the main ring. So I don't think they need to build this. And quite frankly, I don't think there's sufficient time left for humanity for this to even break ground, because we're in the latter days.
I think it's kind of redundant, really. I mean, some of the breakthroughs they're making right now, I mean, why going to this kind of level? And, literally, we're going to see a whole heap of money disappearing into a hole in the ground. This will literally give them a way to justify asking for billions upon billions from the over 100 countries that are involved in the projects there at CERN. And a lot of people, I imagine, and of course I'm speculating here, Anthony, but a lot of people will get rich off the back of something like this, I would imagine.
Yeah, they would. But again, I just want to reemphasize the linear accelerator, the plasma wake field accelerator known as AWAKE, is the prototype, and they will build a larger AWAKE. And therefore, the linear will take over where this larger planned ring-based, will leave off. They won't need to break ground because the linear will take care of it. Now, real quick, Kev, we didn't talk about the connection of blockchain to CERN. But again, we only have a few minutes. Very quickly, because the World Wide Web was spawned from CERN for data distribution, the same thing has occurred with blockchain. Blockchain was spawned out of CERN. People want to know where it came from. It came out of CERN, the same way the World Wide Web did. Why is that? Because they're utilizing quantum computers from D-Wave at CERN for the data analysis. This is also what is required when you're talking about opening a doorway at the quantum scale. You have to have a quantum computer to control your quantum energies, the energies derived from the collisions, utilizing the particle accelerator AWAKE and the main ring. Now, because of the quantum computers and the fact that the ring itself is a quantum mechanics quantum computer, this is, and we didn't elaborate on it today, and we can do that on another show, Kev. This is why blockchain has its origins in the main ring of CERN, simply because of the quantum mechanics that are involved in producing the blockchain system, because it can only operate by way of a quantum computer, which is what the main ring is. And the smaller dummy computers, dummy terminals, as I call them, are the IBM and D-Wave versions. Go ahead, sir.
Brilliant show, Anthony. Looking at the chat room, I think people have really enjoyed this tonight. Dawn in there, great show. A lot of people enjoying this, and a lot of people looking forward to Friday. L.A. Marzulli and Rebecca in there. I remember she always used to share the images as well of these particle colliders that can fit within the palm of your hand. We're literally talking about them on microchips, folks. This has been a really, really productive show tonight, and I've really enjoyed going over everything that we've covered in the past. It's good to take this look back to sometimes get a clearer picture of just where we are now and where we're going in the future. I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. Please go and check out Anthony over on patreon.com/Anthony Patch. Get Entangled magazine. Check all that out at anthonypatch.com. And of course, I'll be back tomorrow night with Gary Heseltine from UFO Truth magazine. We'll be getting into Rendlesham Forest, disclosure, and so much more. Until then, wherever you are, make it TFR.